Good morning, everyone. Today, I have the honor and the blessing of speaking with Aleta Karstad, who is a out of doors artist, activist, naturalist, conservationist, and a role model. Aleta received the Robert Bateman Award by the Canadian Wildlife Federation in 2018. And basically, that award goes to people who inspire others toward nature conservation. And Aleta has been doing that for 40 years. So tell me, when I was reading about you, it was clear that this vocation started really young for you. What inspired your passion for art and for nature?
Oh, uh, well, I guess my parents, my dad was working in wildlife disease research, but I think I was just one of those little kids that loved animals. and and my mom would get me these coloring books from the grocery store, and they were wildlife coloring books. So they had, bears and deer and seals and all kinds of things. And I spent a lot of my time just quietly coloring. And then as we got older and I was joined by some siblings, Dad would take us out on field trips, and we could help catch snakes and go hunting and stuff like that. We lived in Georgia for the summers, and I was born in Guelph, Ontario, but when I was 3, we moved to Wisconsin for him to go to university. And so in Georgia, then I would catch skinks and turtles and big caterpillars and spiders and all kinds of stuff. So we were a family that was surrounded by nature.
What a great childhood. Idyllic.
Yeah.
So you met your husband, Fred Schueler, who's a biologist, and you've worked together quite a bit. So how did your art impact his work, and how did his work as a biologist impact your art?
Well, when I was in art school, I learned watercolor, and I decided I wanted to be a biological illustrator, and I was painting little insects life size, very, very detailed. And so when I got my first job after art school at the Canadian Museum of Nature in the design and display, working on their exhibits. That was because I had applied for a position as a technician in herpetology, working with amphibians and reptiles. But that position had already been filled. And so since my CV had so much art, and I'd been through 3 years of art school, they handed me over to the design and display department. And I had met Fred in Toronto while I was still in art school, and he was going to the University of Toronto. And he popped up at the museum while I was working there at the lunch table because he'd come to measure frogs. So that that connection with the Canadian Museum of Nature, where I was working, then got us in touch with each other. And so, yeah, he sublet my apartment actually while I was visiting my folks in Kenya. My dad's wildlife research brought the whole family except me, because I'm the eldest, to Kenya to work on wildlife diseases there. So when I went for 6 weeks to Kenya, then Fred was subletting my apartment so he could be closer to the the frogs he was measuring in the collection of the Canadian Museum of Nature. And we went out a few times catching frogs while he was around, and I just neither of us could imagine not having each other in our lives after that. It's just that just seemed so natural that here's a biologist, so marry him, you know. And so then I illustrated his PhD thesis. I did all his graphs and charts and that sort of thing. Drew a frog for him, and so then I got a book to write, and we decided we'd just take off, and he actually took sort of a sabbatical from finishing his PhD thesis because we were on the road so much. So it was a Canadian Nature Notebook, and the idea was to go across Canada and find habitats to describe and to paint. And the nice thing about being married to Fred was, like, I called him sort of like my biologist. If he didn't know the answer to something like, what's this called and what does it do? And just everything. If he didn't know the answers, he knew where to look it up. Yeah. So that's the way it still is. You know, he looks up everything that we've ever seen in his database if either of us need to know something, and he can answer my questions. So if I'm writing a blog about one of my paintings and where we were, and it's like, what species was this tree, and you know, when did we see that fox or that Blanding's turtle, and help me look up the identifications for plants, and he's a general biologist, even though he got his PhD thesis, PhD working in zoology on the geographic variation in leopard frogs. So we still go out frogging in the spring, and basically our life is still the same.
So you spent 9 consecutive years, doing this 2-week artist in residence in New Brunswick. And I'm just wondering, what changes have you noticed and documented over that period of time, going back to the same place and nature over and over again every year?
Well, it's the same place in that it's New Brunswick, but really the New Brunswick Museum has, they set up that Biota NB survey to do one place for 2 years. So they have done, they've done 6 places now, and we've been with them for, well, was it 9 years? I suppose they didn't do one last year. So we're on the 6th place. That was the painting behind me was done at the Spednick protected natural area. And they're all being done in protected natural areas, which are places that hadn't been completely logged over yet, and places that were kind of given to New Brunswick, and or they preserved it so that they can't be logged and they can't have any extraction of resources, but they are used for recreation. And so the museum, the New Brunswick Museum, decided, and our friend Don McAlpine there decided that the museum the New Brunswickans needed to know what are in all of these places that were set aside. So they invited up to 60 biologists each year.
Wow.
And
Yep.
so Fred was one of the biologists, and I was invited to be I considered it visiting artist at the time, but the position is called resident artist. So I keep coming back and living with them for 2 weeks, camping, being hosted in community halls and recreation centers and old courthouses and wherever the place that they can find that's large enough for the museum to set up their labs. So yes, and so that they purchase paintings from me each year, which is what keeps us coming back for sure.
Yeah, so they're in the museum.
Yeah, they are. I have about they have about somewhere between 30 and 40 paintings of mine there from over the years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so what changes have you observed over time when every year you're going out and documenting and drawing, painting? Are you noticing a lot of changes in the areas that you visit?
Well, there are certain amphibians that are having a hard time, and particularly chorus frogs. So they are not in a lot of the places that we used to see them. And you're talking about in general, like not just in New Brunswick, but everywhere. Yeah, so we often go back to places we've been to, sort of like a dog keeps going around and sniffing in the same spots.
Yes.
And so there are been invasive crayfish coming in and reducing and even wiping out populations of native crayfish, changing the ecology of stream bottoms. There's of course been parking lots put up in places where there used to be trees, but there's also been secondary forests growing up in places that just used to be fields. And that reduces the grassland component of our environment, and so some of the grassland birds are disappearing because the forests are growing up, and so people have this kind of impulse, plant more trees, but in an area that has lots of trees and lots of natural forest, it's important to maintain the grasslands, and one of the ways that the farmers do this is by haying, growing hay on them. But if they have more than one cut of hay, like they used to just harvest hay sort of when it gets to its maximum height, take it off. By then, the ground nesting birds like the upland plover would have finished raising their brood and flown back off to Argentina. But when they have an early cut and a late cut of hay, then we found, so now we don't see upland plovers around here anymore.
Oh.
So that it's a bird that was just at the edge of its range here. So you see the canaries in the coal mines are the animals that are at the edge of their range, and a lot of the species at risk in Canada are species that actually are doing fairly well farther south, but they were at the edge of their range here, and so when they disappear, you notice it.
Yes.
Yeah.
You made an observation that made me kind of sad, because it pointed out just we're rushing and we're not, we're in our cars, we're not walking as much. We rush everywhere. We're looking at our phones. We're not noticing nature. And you had made this comment that you're surprised by your own paintings or drawings because you sit in nature, not in a studio, and therefore you're in a dialogue with nature, documenting every observation as you go. And then your finished product is all of those observations put into one. And it made me sad just because I realized how much we probably don't even, we miss we don't see we see a tree, we see stuff, but we don't observe. So we miss out on so much. So I want to come back to that with you, and can you elaborate on that, on that process?
Yeah, sometimes I've often said that I don't really see something until I've drawn it. You just, you don't count the legs. um, or the scales. And I've painted almost every amphibian and reptile in Canada from life over the years. And it's wonderful to get to know these creatures, to get to know the way they move, what their responses are, how quickly they get used to my presence. That's a personal thing. Like, I've painted a slug that was, there's slugs have different personalities, the different species of them, and some of them are very shy, and I can look at them for almost an hour before they'll start moving and poke their eyes out. And then anyway, so the slug project was introduced land snails and slugs in Canada. And I was working on that in 2007, 2008. And at the back of that book, there's a picture of a slug looking down from being held on a stick. He's looking down at his portrait. So yeah, and then there's this watercolor down below, sort of the back of the book. But I sometimes work from photographs when it's not the season that I need to do the painting. Sometimes I often use photographs to finish my paintings when I didn't quite get done before it started to rain or before the sunset. Here's the, oh, sorry, my background is getting in the way.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So looking at, that's so cool. Like, who's that? That looks a lot like me.
Yeah, I think it was just thinking, how far is it to the bottom? Am I going to have to drop off, or can I reach it? Yeah. So yeah, photographs, you can take a picture, but that doesn't mean you've really seen it. And the other, because the picture is like taken in a second, and you're missing all of the other sensory input. You're missing what the air feels like, what the birds are saying, what the smells are coming up from the plants or the forest floor. And it's and then the time that it takes to paint, it's sort of like, what the painting is the result of a slow motion sort of time, what do you call it, time lapse. Yeah. Only sometimes by the time I'm finished, then I've lost the light, and so then my photograph that I took earlier can be useful to finish up the painting. So artists have been using, plein air artists have been using photographs for hundreds of years, actually. Mm-hmm. Like when they first started taking pictures, they started using them to help them with their paintings.
Yes.
So
yes, because as you say, the light is going to change. If you're spending your whole day painting, the light's going to change throughout the day.
There are some people, like some artists are really good at painting fast. My friend Phil Chadwick, he's a retired weather forecaster and with Environment Canada, and he still teaches. He still does workshops and courses teaching. But he's been painting the weather for many years, and I love his skies. And he's done a study on Tom Thompson, one of the group of 7, And his thing is, which will be a book at some point. Tom Thompson was a weatherman. There's a talk on that because he has sort of like done forensic analysis of the skies and the conditions that are shown in Tom's work, because Tom was so fast, and Phil himself is also a very fast painter. And this is something that I aspire to. I'm a real details person, and it's very difficult for me to paint anything without putting what I can see in it. And I'm nearsighted by nature, so what I see is detail. But I keep trying to take a lesson from their work, and at least at the start of a painting, paint fast so that I can get the whole thing done in terms of the atmosphere. And you know, clouds are always moving, the sky is always changing.
Yes.
But, to capture a sky is an art and a craft in itself.
Absolutely, it's one of the hardest things to paint.
Yeah.
The sky.
And water's hard to paint too, but I've been practicing.
Well, that's good. So tell me about your nature match, because you have all of this experience painting and drawing nature, and now I'm just looking. I wrote the date last year, between August and October 2020. You had this Indiegogo fundraiser to create this nature match game, which is good for all ages. But I'm thinking, what a gift to children who may not spend a lot of time outdoors, or not observing or understanding what they're looking at. And now they can see your beautiful illustrations and read up on them. And so it's an educational product, but it's a fun game at the same time. So can you talk about how did that idea come up for you to do that?
Well, I met this lady in the airport in Edmonton, and I was on my way out west, and she was on her way back east. But we spent about 3 hours in between our flights talking, and we just clicked. And I showed her all my art on my phone, all the photos. And she didn't forget that. She invited us to her place in Belleville once we had both arrived back home. And she said, I have this game I hear. She just presented me with this game that had been made in Germany of matching cards. So there were pairs of cards that you had to match. And it was an artist's work. It was a biological illustrator, actually, from the 1700s. And it was a long time ago, and she was doing watercolors. And she said, I just want to see your stuff like this. So long story short, we stuck with it, and I found the playing card factory in Mississauga to produce it. And instead of being in a square box, in a cube-like box, this is a nature match.
Yes.
So it's in this box here.
Okay.
And we have a booklet that has all of the species in it, and all the information and the tiles are very hard and well made.
There we go. And so how many matches are there? Is it 30? How many?
You match two in pairs, and there's 72
Oh my goodness.
cards in there.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, what a great product. And so when did that, because I know the fundraiser was in the fall, like summer, fall. When did your product actually go out?
Christmas-ish. Everybody got their cards by Christmas. Okay. Yeah, so there were about I would say 100 supporters. and most of them ordered more than one deck, more than one pack. And so and I got lots of lovely comments back, very excited, saying the kids love them, and my elderly mother is so interested in playing it, and it helps her remember stuff. And it was nice because it was just, you know, in the middle of COVID, and people really needed things that the family could do together, and things that they could do which wasn't on screen.
Yeah.
And it has such a nice feel. Each card just feels really great to sort of flip it. And yeah, so it's challenging because there's a smallmouth bass and the largemouth bass, and it's very hard to tell them apart. Mm-hmm. So you know, you have to. So there's easy things and hard things, and a friend of mine has played it with her. I guess he's about not even 2 years old, and what she does is that she gives him birds, and so just like maybe 6 cards, and he can find the matches, and he's all excited about it. So you can make you can reduce the deck, but the whole thing takes about half hour, 45 minutes to play for adults to match all the cards.
I think it'd be wonderful for teachers too, as a tool, even if they broke up into groups and they had birds, or, you know, divided them into sections, and then they could switch next time, they could have a different section. But I just think what a great way to present that information and make it fun.
Yeah, people can become the expert, you know, that they can match their card and then say, you know, let's look this one up. I don't recognize this bird or this fish or this insect. And
yes.
Yeah, so next Christmas we'll have wildflowers. We'll have a new game out.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And maybe the next time that'll be just all birds or
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be putting a link to your to the game, which I know it links through your website, but I'll put a separate link for the game. And then I'll put the link for your website as well, so that people can go and read through the journals or the blog, and look at the different collections and see your turtle that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for your time. I'm so excited to share this with people and to get people out there observing, documenting, seeing that there is an impact to doing that. And there's not just the enjoyment, but that it's a service to other people that yes. You've observed, taken the time to observe something, and you can share that with other people. So I appreciate what you've done, both of you, what you've done over this long period of time, that will become a gift to every generation to come. Thank you so much for your work.
You're welcome.